You brought your pregnant wife for 8 hours while you come and yell at a
Damn.
microphone. I don't know if that's the best move.
Electronic devices, you'll find an electronic device called
You got a bev ready to go, I'm assuming?
Do it.
Sounds great. All right. Well, without further ado, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. Very excited to be bringing the maker of noise in many bands, Mr. Taylor Young. Thank you so much for joining me on the show, man.
Hell yeah. Psyched to be here.
Hey, very excited. It was funny because when I was like prepping for this podcast, there's like just so many bands that you're involved in. So maybe you could give like a proper interview intro of like what you do in each of those bands. Obviously, running the Pit recording studios, but as far as the active projects that you're involved in that most people would know, do you just want to quickly run through those kind of elevator pitch, if you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. I've played guitar and Twisting Tongues for over 10 years at this point. I used to play drums and nails. I had a band called Eyes of the Lord that broke up about a year ago, where I also played guitar.
Mm-hmm.
I play guitar in Criminal Instinct. I did I'm doing like a solo death metal thing called Zeus or Zaus, or however you want to say it. It's fine with me.
Mm-hmm.
That has a demo out and another record coming out soon.
Cool.
And then I play, the newest thing is I'm playing guitar and singing in a band called Dead Body with my brother. That's kind of a more metal thing, but we've been spending the last 2 years kind of refining that.
Mm-hmm.
I also play guitar in the band God's Hate that just put out a record.
Yeah, so very, very plethora of activity as far as even just like things in the mix right now. So obviously there's a bunch of, God's Hate is probably one of the most, most prevalent releases that I've seen, and, wanted kind of inspired for me to get you on the podcast and talk about that record, but also some of the things that you're doing in the recording realm as well. But before we chat more about music, we got to check some bevs. That's a mandatory thing here on the show. So it's tradition for the guests to go first. So tell the folks at home what you're going to be checking for the show here today.
I have an Alani New is the brand. It's the electric tie-dye flavor, which is cherry limeade. It's kind of new, at least for me. I've seen them, and they just started showing up in Target and Ralph's and stuff here.
Got you. Yeah, show that can. Oh, wow. Alani New. And that's spelled like N-U, like new metal.
Yeah, kind of.
I love that.
I don't know what they're about. I haven't looked into the brand really, but they are a no sugar, low carb kind of thing. So
nice.
An energy drink, not a soda.
Yes, gotcha.
I'm gonna open now because I've been waiting for this.
It's been sitting in your fridge prepping for this episode for the longest time.
It's been sweating out here for a while.
I see. Yeah, do you have a rule as far as the studio? Like it's all coasters as far as all the stuff?
No, but I did get
as you set it down without a coaster.
Yeah, a coaster. This one I actually found on the street.
Oh,
and
okay.
Then kind of my fiance Kyla, she kind of brought it back to life. And then the rest of the stuff I have coated so that it can't affect the wood. Really,
got you. That's a smart move from an engineer's standpoint. It's like even if some band's in there and then places it down, it's safe on that end.
I expect others to fuck it up. So.
Yeah, the amount of times that I've seen, guitar amps that have, just like the circles where either a beer was or a beer spilt or anything at a show is it's the number keeps racking up the more shows that I play for sure.
have that for sure.
Definitely. So I'm going to be drinking. I don't know how familiar with the show you are, Taylor, but we actually have some beverage sponsors. So this
Oh,
is a brewery here in Calgary that also makes some craft sodas. So this is a mocktail mule kicker. So
what?
if you've ever had, which I don't think you are, because I think you're straight edge as far as the
Right.
X in your in your
Sure.
IG handle. But yeah, this is like a Moscow Mule, but no alcohol. It's just like a craft soda. It's definitely been one of my go-tos since they've dropped it, and been looking forward to drinking one as well because it's a nice hot day. So
So if it's a mocktail, this is my alcohol ignorance. Does it taste sweet, or is it like a fake beer kind of thing?
yeah, I got you. So it's like the main nodes or flavors that are in this is like ginger, mint, and lime. So it's got that lime sweetness, probably similar to one of the, because yours is a cherry limeade.
Yeah,
So yours
got a
is
bite.
probably a little bit more into the sweet town, and I'm kind of like not like full on into savory, but it's got a nice balance where it's not like overly sweet.
It's like a soda,
Yes.
not a beer.
Totally. Yeah, their
Okay.
other soda that they have is like it's like a pineapple punch kind of thing, and it's like very, very sweet. So this is like not overwhelming as far as like, your sugar cube intake goes, if that makes
Sounds
sense.
like it's like a ginger ale almost.
Yeah, very similar to that.
Okay.
So cheers to you, my friend. Really excited to be doing this episode.
Yeah.
And I think I'm always take account of beverages that are checked on the show that I've never seen before. So I've never seen that one. So I hope
I
it's
had,
as good as you say it is.
yeah, I mean, I only started buying them maybe 2 weeks ago or something.
Got you. So it's very timely as far as doing this podcast.
I also have 200 milligrams of caffeine, so instead of this episode getting more tired, it may go up.
Okay, well, let's go. Okay, Taylor. Well, I always ask any new person that's here on the show, just like some getting a little bit of context about how they got into heavy music, how they got into hardcore metal, however you want to spin it. I know you've done a plethora of interviews, so if you want to do like the Cole's Notes version, that's cool. But if you want to stretch it out, that's cool as well. So take me back in time. Tell me the first time that you heard like heavy guitar riffs or a breakdown or however that kind of experience was for you.
Uh, well, my parents are musicians, and my dad had Black Sabbath tapes and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So that was kind of the gateway. And then uh, in the '90s, grunge was huge. So like you would get kind of almost heavy stuff on the radio,
Totally.
and then I would hear these parts where it's like, oh, I wish it kind of did that all the time. And then I got into like Sepultura, Pantera, Metallica, and stuff like that. And then my brother, I grew up in Connecticut, and a bunch of my brother's friends would go to Connecticut hardcore shows, and they
Mm,
left a bunch of CDs in his car, and I kind of became obsessed with those, and it kind of snowballed from there
got you.
naturally.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you grew up on Connecticut, which is like literally the opposite side of the country where you are now. So like what I'm sure there's a big gap of time as far as the first time you heard heavy music to when you were moving, but what kind of like brought you to the West Coast?
My dad worked for ESPN and did a lot of travel stuff. Like
Mhm.
he was sort of an audio engineer, and he is an audio engineer, but he was also a video engineer, and he would kind of be the guy in control of making sure all the gear works. And
Got
that was
you.
also kind of got into recording because he would have just stuff. So I just started playing with all that stuff, and uh, but he got a job offer on the West Coast where he wouldn't have to travel.
Ah, I
So
see. Okay, cool.
he took it. Even my mom, who they were not together, she thought it was a great idea and came over here too.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting because like ESPN, I feel like certain sports, just in the, because I come from a marketing background, so I always think about like certain sports kind of cater to some of that like either heavier stuff, or just like radio rock. So it's interesting to hear how your dad was in that world and that got you into recording, but also there's like some similar ties to like it wouldn't be surprising if you were watching an ad for a like an upcoming football game and you heard a Pantera or a Metallica track behind that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, he actually didn't give a shit about sports, but
Okay.
he really liked, the filming and stuff like that. He actually has a couple Emmys for robotic camera work for NASCAR.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that meant he was like running a couple cameras at a time and like turning them with a computer or something like that.
Wow.
I should know more about that, so maybe ask.
Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting because I think as far as the time of recording this, the Olympics are all happening right now, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine where they were talking about speed skating, and like as far as the operating a camera and following those athletes is very similar to operating a camera for NASCAR because they're moving so fast, and those obviously there's a difference as far as speed goes, but the movement is still and the camera following is still the same. So um
Just saying, yeah. He actually worked the Athens Olympics as well.
very interesting. Okay, cool. So yeah, like just through his career, like what were some of the opportunities that you got early on to either play around with like recording equipment or anything music of that basis? Because I'm sure like there's some stuff it's like if I give this to little Taylor, he won't know what to do with it. He might even break it. But like what were some of those early opportunities for you to at least play around with stuff?
The earliest one was he had like a digital 8-track that was a Tascam,
Okay.
and I would just kind of fiddle around with it, especially when like the end of me living in Connecticut and the beginning of me living here, I was messing with that thing and just kind of writing songs alone and recording and kind of figuring out. I definitely did it wrong, but I was just kind of trying to make it sound as heavy as I could with what I had in front of me,
Totally.
which
So
is basically all I ever did until maybe 5 years ago when I started giving a shit about the technicality of things.
got you. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I definitely want to kind of break down kind of the origin of the actual like studio and some of those things. What year was it or how old were you when you actually moved to California?
It was 2000. We actually left Connecticut. I think it was like December 26th, 2003, and we got here. We made it a kind of a event and stopped and saw all our family on the way, and I think we
Mm,
took like weeks. So technically, we left in 2003, got here in 2004.
got you. Oh yeah, technically speaking, because are making that drive out around Boxing Day, Christmas time.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty interesting. How it's like technically it's over 2 years, but like you're saying, it's over a couple weeks. Um, so were you playing in bands when you were in Connecticut, or did that only start when you moved to the West Coast?
I was, but I was 16, so the stuff I was doing was like we were doing pay to play shows at
Hmm.
the local venue and like garbage stuff. Nobody in our little town gave a shit about hardcore really.
Hmm,
So I would be kind of just playing in whatever band needed a drummer,
got you.
and uh, had another thing that never really played shows with one of my other friends. But definitely didn't play like actual shows until I moved here.
Got you. And like that was so many years ago, but like when you were actually making that transition, was there not like a fear, but just like were you like were you more excited as far as like knowing how, heavy music is pretty infamous and legendary within just the California state itself? Or was there a thought of like, oh, like am I going to be able to start bands or like am I going to be able to make connections or were things already lined up before the time you moved, or was that too
I
early
was
on?
I was pissed.
Okay.
It was basically how could you do this to me situation. Um, and then when I landed in California, I went to a high school that had this weird track system.
Okay.
So I got here in January, and school didn't start till March.
Okay.
And when you're 16, 2 months is basically a year. So it
Absolutely. Yeah.
felt like eternity alone with no friends, basically.
Mm.
So I was just kind of poking around on the internet for shows and people to play music with. I ended up finding a few that I was in bands with for a really long time. Uh, and that I would go to every show that I could. Luckily, where I moved to, I was centered between two venues that basically exclusively had hardcore shows.
Interesting. Okay.
So, like, one of them was 4 miles from my house, the other was like 8 miles. So it. I went from going to 2 shows a year to like a show a week,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of made friends with the people who ran the venues, and I would go mop the floors to get into the shows for free.
That's crazy. You're like, and was that just like, I just want to make as many connections as I can, or was it like, I don't have like money to pay for these shows? How can I
It
at least get my
mattered
foot in
for
the door?
sure. I was spending every dollar I could on records and CDs and stuff. So like
Mm-hmm.
money for shows was like, okay, it makes sense, but if I'll work to get in,
Sure.
or I'll try to make a band to play the show so I can be at the show.
I see. Yeah, that's very interesting. And yeah, it's funny how you were just mentioning like moving across to California. Like your mom was like, yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. But you were just at the time, I think as you grow up, you just realize that you are this insignificant person in this larger
Yeah.
world. But at the time, you feel like everything is so detrimental. So you're like, I'm moving to this place where I have no friends and it's over for me and blah, blah, blah. So you're like, obviously, I'm sure your career in music would look totally different if you, decided to stay or whatever it is.
Yeah. Maybe not, because even in like later years, I have become friends with a lot of the Connecticut people.
Mm-hmm.
Even like some of the older ones. One of Twitching Tongues members now is Sean Martin, who was in Hatebreed for 10 years, and
Mm-hmm.
he kind of brought us around to all the older dudes, and we're friends with all those guys now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of weird how that works. But
Yeah.
it all happened because being from Connecticut meant we worshiped Hatebreed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, I think that's a lot of like really good context as far as like origin spots and then like kind of coming over to California, because I think like a lot of the bands that you listed off are just like big staple acts from like especially the Southern California sphere. So what in your opinion was like kind of like the first serious band that like if you're kind of trying to showcase your discogs or what you've done, you're like, this is kind of the seed that actually like became more than just a little sampling, if that makes sense.
Well, Colin and my brother and I, around 2005 to 2008, we played in a ridiculous straight edge band called Fight Everyone.
Sick.
And those were probably the first like big shows we played.
Mhm.
Where it was like, holy shit, like why do these people care this much? But just soaking it in.
Mhm.
He joined later after the drummer left, but that was definitely the first time. And then we stopped doing that band and started doing a band called Ruckus right after that, which was like that. The other band made us realize that we could do it seriously and kind of how to almost.
Okay.
And then Ruckus was us taking the music a little bit more seriously instead of just like straight edge, everything. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That entire band, every song was a fucking straight edge song.
It's
but
like,
it was ridiculous for ridiculous sake. Like,
yeah, it was self-aware ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure.
So just trying to break that down a little bit more, like what was the moment, or because I think that everyone has that moment, and being in different bands, like every band after gets better and better and you learn more and there's more things that you can apply. So like what was the biggest thing where you're like, oh, this is the focus that that we need to take with any band that we're doing in the future to actually make it not just like we're constantly losing money, but we might actually just break even with some of these things?
yeah, it was definitely not a career goal probably until Twitching Tongues.
Okay.
But Ruckus was like, let's play the most insane shows we can, or like let's make the most like moshy music possible.
Totally.
Basically. And then it turned into, after Twitching Tongues kind of naturally lifted off, we were like, damn, we could just tour and this could be it.
Mm-hmm.
Which we did. That maybe lasted for 2 years or something like that.
Yeah. As far as like you started to do like some more bands, like was the idea of doing your own like recording and stuff like was it just like, well, like Taylor's the recording guy, so you're going to do our demos or you're going to do our albums or whatever that was, or were you kind of how do I word this, like you were like, oh, I want to spend some time doing bands, or was like recording always in the mix, pun intended, of that?
It was nice. That was a good pun.
Yeah, thanks.
It was at first. It was kind of like a means to an end. Just like, I'm gonna track this because we don't have the money to go anywhere.
Sure.
And then we did some records with other people, and I was honestly never psyched on those. And
On the records you did with other people?
yeah, just
Gotcha.
because like it was like, okay, I wish I knew that I needed it to sound this way going in and things like that. Like I thought, everything could be fixed in post, which I definitely realized it cannot. There was just a lot of little things that led to me like either getting better myself or wanting more control of it in general. And then just friends started noticing, so I started recording other bands too.
Interesting.
And then it just kind of became a thing. The studio itself was an accident because we were just trying to build a soundproof drum room because my neighbors kept calling the cops on me.
Oh.
So once we realized that we should do 2 rooms, that like my dad was kind of just like, let's turn it into an actual recording studio.
Got
and
you.
it took like 2 years just because we would chip away at it over time.
Yeah, you can't like take an entire 2 or 3 months off of just doing that. Life
Yeah.
still goes on, and other
Right.
projects.
It was also just kind of a lot of money, just because we're going really hard on this soundproofing thing. You can barely hear. It sounds like a car stereo is on down the street when you're standing in front of my house on the sidewalk.
Got you. Yeah.
You can barely hear
So
it.
if you're walking your dog in your neighborhood, you might like hear something, but it's not like you hear it for the entire block.
Right.
That
You
makes
can.
sense.
It's like just in front of my house. The only place where it's like almost loud is in my room in the
Got you.
house.
Yeah. So yeah, you've really done your due diligence for that. Based off your neighbor who was calling the cops all the time, like was it just that one specific person who just didn't like loud music, or was it
Probably
a series of people?
I never looked into it, and it was like during the daytime that it would happen.
Oh.
It was annoying. It was actually only when I did it in the garage, but sometimes we would set up drums in the house and have less of a problem, but we were always on edge about it.
Interesting. Yeah. It's like if it's happening during the daytime, like, and there's stuff to, if it's not done outside, like, is that not fair game? I don't know what the rules are for stuff like that.
I think the noise rule is like 100 decibels or something like that, and it's from, I think it's from like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. or something like that.
Oh, okay. And then does the decibel level as far as like rules go down or up, or?
Pretty sure. I haven't ever really looked into it, but I've just kind of seen these things
Yeah.
offhand on the
Yeah.
Next Door app or something like that, with people complaining.
Got you. Yeah. Yeah. So I was just also we were talking about the so the things were working in tandem with one another, and it was just like that thing where it's like, oh, like Taylor's the recording guy, he'll help us out, and over time, you oh yeah, the point I wanted to bring up is you were mentioning how when you did go to record with other people, it just never turned out the way that you wanted to. And that reminded me of from my work, we had Kurt Ballou from Converge on, and running God City Music and like mega recording studios, worked with a ton of people. And I remember when we were doing his podcast, we were just talking about how like just the communication between musician to engineer or producer is like it is that thing where it's like how do I communicate this versus like it's got to sound heavier or like chunkier or whatever it is. So like what has been that lesson for you in all the projects and albums that you've worked on where you can either be the translator that the musician just doesn't know that language, if that makes sense?
Partially, honestly, working with Kurt on Nails Records was kind of like, no, I wouldn't say I learned the adjectives, but I like kind of learned how to express it to other people to have it make sense to them. You know what I mean? Like there's rarely been like because I've been in musician shoes. I'm not just like an engineer who's like push and go. Like I want to be able to convey their artistic points of view, and I yeah, just from being in shoes, I think I've gotten pretty good at understanding what they're trying to say. But I also just ask for references. Like somebody says, I want a guitar tone that's heavy and thick. I'm like, well, show me, with sound, please, so that I can understand. And then I usually get it close, or I'll get them their own version that they're excited about.
Yeah, because like heavy and thick, applies to many different genres of heavy music. But like if you're looking for that, like, something that is very like HM2 heavy or like, is very produced or, however that looks, like you need to, be more, put the microscope on it a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like how has that, the process, have you find that your like musicianship and like your songwriting and all of that has improved or changed in any way with working with so many other bands where it's not your music per se?
Musicianship, maybe. Um, I mean, I've worked with a ton of people who fucking blow my mind. Um, but I wouldn't say I've taken any of it and run with it. But I would say maybe I have been challenged to make something sound a certain way, and
Okay.
it kind of pulled out of my comfort zone
Okay.
a little bit. And
Is there a specific moment or anecdote that really pushed you?
um, specifically, I can't think of one, but I can think of things where I've been, like, pushed back on like a mix idea or like a pedal or something like that, and then ended up being like, "You were right. This sounds awesome," and then and used it in the future.
Got you. Okay. Yeah. So you just had to like again go into that uncharted territory to be like, oh, I like, and expand your mind a little bit more.
Yeah.
Got you. Do you have any of those specific like like the pit recordings, like secret weapons or things like that? Obviously, I don't want you to show all your secret ingredients of the recipe, but if there's anything specific that you're like, I always try to at least put a little bit of this on any record.
Um, I guess one of the secrets that would technically be like an engineer no would be that I'll turn up the low end on guitars, like
Okay.
into the like bass guitar zone, which
Okay.
kind of brings out the chunk and like the basically the moshy sounds and things like that, just in a way that would make like a Hollywood engineer go, ugh.
Yeah. And is that a no-no just because it's like and just correct me if I'm wrong, because there's been times where my guitar tone with certain bands have been very bassy, and then the bass player of that band is like, well, do you even need me if your guitar tone is gonna sound like that? Or
Yeah.
is that
There's
the reason?
pretty much, it's like you're taking up space that is supposed to be taken up elsewhere,
Got you.
and you're taking away headroom for, because typically a guitar lives in the mid range
Yep.
to high end, but like the giving it the low is like, yeah, you're eating up space that you shouldn't be eating up, but really it's guitar music, so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's probably one. As far as like stuff, it's probably just an old Marshall JMP that I have
Yeah.
that just has done the job forever. Like I'll try an amp, it'll be cool, and then I'll try that amp and be like, why do I have all these amps? Because I really just need the one.
How many amps are in your studio?
Something like 18 or something.
Damn. Okay. So yeah, because one of my questions was like, like I think guitar heads overall, you can really you see the ones that, especially in a live setting, you're like, okay, everyone's got a 6505, everyone's got like some kind of triple rec situation. So I was gonna ask you in your opinion, what is the most overused amp on heavy music recording, and what is the most underused amp? Obviously, we were talking about the Marshall there, but where does your mind go with that?
Overused is for sure the 6505. It used to be the triple rec,
Yeah.
which is interesting because when I was looking for amps in 2005, if I wanted a triple rec, it would be like $1,500 to $2,000,
Yes.
and I think I bought a 5150 for $500. Now, if you look at amps, a 5150, like a real one, is going to cost you $1,500,
Yep.
and you could probably find a triple rec for 800 to 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of
like
switched that way.
Yeah. As far as the least used, Marshall reissued the Silver Jubilee a couple years ago, and I don't think it sold well, and they kind of discontinued it. But it's literally like a JCM 800 with more bass and more gain.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
yeah, it's kind of it's the bass is a little bit finicky, like it's way too much. So you have to pull it back big time. But then if you have the right pedal in front of it, it can really sound like the craziest thing.
Interesting.
The Dead Heat record I did recently is just a Marshall Silver Jubilee.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, because that record rips. So yeah, if that's all, if that's the album to tie to that amp, I'm sold. If anything.
That's sick.
This is more of a selfish question. Have you ever heard of an amp company called Rev?
Rev.
With two V's.
I'm not sure. I think is there. Do they make guitars too?
No, they just to my knowledge, they make amps and pedals. So a little shameless plug. Growing up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, just outside of that, Rev HQ is. So I've been trying to get Dan, who builds all the amps, and Derek, who does all like the logistical marketing and things like that, because they really started as like a very bare bones thing, and now they have like all these huge metal people playing their amps. So as far as the so I guess when it was originally being built, the Generator 120 was like a 4-channel competitor to like the Mesa Road King. So that you wanted to have like super heavy high gain, but also being able to do like clean and things like that. And for me, I used to own one. Unfortunately, like I didn't sell it. It burnt down in a jam space fire, but like that has been my go-to, like combining that like kind of new age kind of sound with my 5150. It's like I've never heard more better high gain. So I always like to plug them, and I'm curious if I could connect you to them, to like, if you could at least get your hands on one, to at least give it a try.
I'm all in.
All in. Yeah, because they have the 120, which is that 4-channel one that I was mentioning. I bought a Generator 100, which is a 2-channel. Then they have like a 740 split. But yeah, they've really exploded. I've been trying to get them on for a podcast to talk about it, because I think Dan originally was like hitting me up on like the Canadian version of Craigslist is called Kijiji. So he was hitting me up on there to like try out his amp, and I was like, I think this is just some random dude that's like building amps in his garage, and they probably sound like shit, but he ended up being this like huge guy and running this whole amp business. So just wanted to plug them really, really quick. So And you were mentioning that that Marshall amp, like that's what a lot of your presets are based off of. Is that correct?
Did use a shitload of that for the STL tones thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because I didn't see it on there at
Mm-hmm.
all. So I didn't want to, since I'm kind of a smaller or just a more niche name compared to a lot of these like deathcore producers that they use. I just wanted to bring something to the table that was unique and not just another bunch of 5150 settings
Totally.
or triple rec settings.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like you were mentioning like maybe you have a little bit more of a niche audience, especially in the heavy music hardcore community with some of the bands you're playing on? Did you feel like when you made those videos of you showcasing that and things like that, did you have any pushback as far as like the hardcore community? Because I find like there's almost like this weird thing is like as soon as you're like, hey, I did something and you can like buy it, there's like immediate pushback as far as like, well, like now you're not about the scene and all this kind of stuff. So I was just kind of curious if you felt any woes of that, or if it was just like people stoked for you.
Seemed like people stoked, but at the same time, you never know what people are saying behind closed doors. But there was no like public discourse about it. It seemed like the people who bought it were all people who already kind of liked my stuff.
Yeah.
But I think still kind of, I guess all of their products have like a big sell and then it trickles for forever.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and it seems to be that whenever somebody talks about or asks like, what do I get for kind of disgusting heavy stuff, that somebody recommends it,
Mm.
which is cool.
Yeah. 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 It doesn't hurt you to once a month be like, oh, like X number of people bought this, and it doesn't need to be like you said this crazy amount
Yeah,
forever. But even if it's like 2 or 3, I'm sure that like helps you out just even a little bit in all the stuff that you're doing.
yeah, it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. So I want to fast forward to the God's Hate, self-titled record that came out at the top of this year. God's Hate hasn't put out any new music in that 5-year span, and I've heard it through like podcasts I've listened to with Brody on, where it's always been kind of like a side project kind of band with a lot of the other stuff that a ton of the other members were involved in.
Yeah.
So as far as that record being out for almost half a year now, and to my knowledge, you guys haven't played a show with all that new material. I think it's all the upcoming ones in October. Like, where have your what's the response been for you specifically, and just like again that very long time span of like following up the last record?
It was partially. I mean, the long time span was partially due to just us doing other stuff for sure, and like since that record, he became a professional wrestler, and
Totally.
then also had 2 kids and things like that. So I was focusing on. Well, I wasn't in the band until this album. It was
Oh,
actually
okay.
right before, but I had played a million shows already, so it was just kind of like my brother was finally like, "Will you just be in the band?" And I said, "Okay, fine."
Right.
And that was right before he had the songs kind of laid out mostly, and he was like, I can't play guitar good enough to warrant me tracking it."
Mm.
So I was already going to play the guitars on the record. So then it just made sense for me to just be in the band. And then so I think most of the songs were written like 3 or 4 years after the last record.
Mm.
And then it just kind of got pushed and pushed. We actually tracked the instruments, I want to say, August 2019.
Oh, okay. Got you.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't start vocals until January 2020, and
Mm.
then didn't finish them until like April or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Because
think I submitted the master in July,
of last
and
year.
then it took another however long that was,
Mm-hmm.
almost a year.
Yeah.
That's
And
because pressing plants are all backed up.
mm-hmm. Do you feel like it was it more on the pressing plan or just like, oh, let's push it out because like still like July, August, like that's still kind of like I think the realities of the pandemic, at least at the time, are kind of settling in. It was like this isn't just a 3 month vacation for bands. Like this might
Yeah.
go on a little bit longer. So, do you think it was more pressing plan or pandemic that was kind of pushing it out?
I would say the pandemic was what allowed us to get the vocals done faster.
Oh, okay, not
Just
slower.
not slower, just because he wasn't wrestling in the
Oh,
time.
okay, got you.
So we were kind of like, well, we had already decided that we were going to get it done. Like I wrote the first 2 songs worth of lyrics that we tracked, and it was kind of just like a jump start to be like, hey, I wrote these, let's track these, and then they started writing, and I didn't have to do anymore.
Got you.
And that was in January before the stuff hit. So it was like it was already kind of in motion, but I think because we were home doing less than normal, it made it easier to finish.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that, like, some people are going out there and saying a product of the pandemic, which it's definitely not. It was all written way before that, but it definitely allowed us to finish it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's not clear, but like some people are very open and upfront about like, yeah, we started this band because everyone was at home and we just wanted to start a new project or like write this record. Like a lot of the stuff that my band has just put out, like all those songs I wrote, or I would say 2 out of the 3 of them were like, this is me in this very room in August and May of 2020, just being like, I need to write some music and do something. So, like you were saying, I don't think that there's any shame in just being like, this is a pandemic band or things like that, because like a lot of bands have sprung up, starting in that, but now that they're able to play shows, like if anything, they have a stronger kickstart to their show career. I think that's sick.
I agree. Yeah, my friend Ian, who sings in Regional Justice Center, he started one called Military Gun, and
Yes.
has since played. They just played their first show. They're about to put out their third record, which is crazy. Within a year and a half, and it's the steam it's picking up is crazy. Like we're scheduling their album recording for next year and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when he came on the podcast, like he was just like he is a man that he's kind of like a shark. Like if sharks stop swimming, they die. And I feel like Ian is kind of that same kind of person. Is like he needs to be making music or working on movies and just keep moving. So yeah,
Yeah, he 100%. As soon as he's like sits still, I can see the sadness overcome him.
Absolutely. That's interesting because he was showing me just like some of the very DIY demoing that he does just like off of his phone, and bragging like I've A/B tested all these iPhones, like this one's better if you're doing drums or this one's better if you're doing vocals. So how did you essentially work with him in that regard, where it's like you're taking these very bare bones recordings and demos and bringing it into that professional studio recording, but also like trying to not like replicate the demo, but still like not oversaturated that, if that makes sense.
I both the records we recorded during the pandemic, one being RJC LP, which was that was me just making it as extreme as possible without it sounding like anything else.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Just like loaded with low end. They tuned to E, but it sounds like they tuned to fucking B or something like that. And I think Military Gun was kind of in a different extreme, where it was just like we tracked the instruments live and things like that. So it was kind of like let's make it sound as much like just a band in a room as we could. With some production. It was not just like letting it lie, but it was. They're definitely starkly contrasted from each other.
Yeah.
I would use the demos as a sound reference, but I'll use them as like a song reference for sure.
Got you. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like so many killer releases that have come out even just in the last year in changed times that you've had your hand on, obviously, like as far as the time recording this, like Section Hate, RJC, as we've mentioned, Drain's California Cursed. I'm a big Youth Collapse fan, and finding out that you also did that was very, very sick. So, and I also noticed that you worked, and just correct the record if I'm wrong here, but did you do work on both cruelties? So like the Japan cruelty and the UK cruelty?
Yes, I have the monopoly on cruelties.
Yes. Any band name cruelty, however it's spelt, has to work with Taylor. That's
Yeah.
a given.
That's two bands that definitely sound completely different from each other.
Absolutely.
Well.
Yeah. I kind of feel, because I like both for, the different reasons of the different sounds, but I feel like the Japan cruelty obviously has overshadowed the UK one, just with the amount of attention that has got here in North America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the UK, I think cruelty does pretty well as well.
I see. Mm-hmm. So
with the K, I don't think has left Japan yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've
maybe they.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've teased it here on the podcast before, but I'm still setting it up where I'm hopefully going to be having some of the cruelty guys from Japan on the podcast. But the thing that we're trying to figure out is just the language barrier. So it sounds like we're going to have an interpreter on the show, which will be the first time doing that. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Zuma, the guitar player, speaks pretty good English.
What's his name?
Zuma.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe when I need to follow up with them as far as booking it. So maybe I'll ask if they can do it. But it was their idea, so I'm down for whatever.
He may speak to me through a translator, or like take what I say and put it in a translator.
Okay.
It's possible, but he's usually pretty fast. That's why I always thought.
I see. So yeah, there's maybe I'll have to ask him. Is like, are you like, how do you? Because I'm sure that's a huge hurdle for any band that is writing maybe their lyrics in English, but doesn't speak English as their first language. So
yeah.
I want to quickly jump back to the actual the studio itself. We were mentioning at the top of the show, like you don't really have like coaster rules or things like that, but are there any certain recording studio rituals or rules that you have, or things that you try to, no matter the band, no matter their sound, you always try to take part in when they're sitting in your space?
Rules, I guess I just say like bring the bare minimum, people, because as you can see behind me, it is not the biggest space in the world.
Sure.
I think I can comfortably sit 4, but there's always one person who's doing something, so it's kind of okay. But like when there's 5 people in here, it's like there's somebody on the floor, there's one person on the chair over here, there's 3 people on the couch that are kind of like this. So it's like if you bring your pregnant wife, she may not be comfortable, or you may not be comfortable.
Has that happened before, where someone's brought their significant other?
That was a specific thing that happened. Okay. Like you brought your pregnant wife for 8 hours while you come and yell at a microphone. I don't know if that's the best move. Somebody brought their dog one time, and I was just like, you gotta go back and forth between watching your dog outside, and so and it's just like, these are just bad ideas. So basically, I used to have a thing on the wall that said, don't bring your dog, don't bring people who don't need to be here, because it could be a band of all pregnant women. That's fine.
Sure.
If it's, maybe they shouldn't bring their intrusive husband or something.
Totally. Yeah, it's like we are here to make music, not to handhold or babysit people. So
right.
Yeah.
As far as rituals, nothing crazy. I try to not push the boundaries of how they want me involved. So when I approach an idea, I'm kind of like, well, let me know what you think about this. This is just an idea, and usually they're pretty receptive of it. A lot of the time, sometimes I get people who have no idea how it works, and I'm just setting up everything and plugging in the guitar tone exactly how. Like they're like, yeah, just make it sound sick. Well, that happens more than anything because I have 12 amps or however many amps that people have never used before.
Sure.
I'm not gonna sit there and try to dial it in when I can kind of do it faster.
Yeah, yeah. So do you feel like, someone that might have a very novice recording studio experience, like even for myself, like I've been in a plethora of different bands, but like, going to a studio that has like more gear that I've always dreamed of owning, or it's like it's taller than I am as far as the different amps. Like, do you feel like that's overwhelming for some people? So they like tend to take a step backwards versus like embracing that a little bit more?
It could be, or just that they don't know what they want.
Hmm.
Some people come in married to an idea too, and then end up kind of leaving it because they realize that I can make it sound maybe heavier than they thought they could.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. And I think even just on sometimes where it's like, all right, yeah, pick an amp. It's like sometimes I just don't want to like touch anything because I'm like, I just don't want to break anything.
I mean, they're pretty resilient. Like, there's if you buy, have you ever bought stuff on Reverb?
I haven't, but I very well much know what reverb is.
They have like an amp shipping thing where they suggest that you take the tubes out. Um, but I honestly think that's taboo because you think about amps in a trailer just get knocked around. You got usually when you buy an amp and they ship it to you, it's got the tubes in it.
Hmm.
So it's like you don't have to baby it as much as you think you do. I would maybe like not set it upside down or like
Sure.
things like that are a little more obvious. But like I think that tube amps are usually built pretty tough.
Right. Yeah, I think most music gear is built to last.
Yeah,
I was having flashbacks to it's a little different because it's a cab in a road case, but I heard a story once where I was working at a music store and a coworker of mine was on tour, had a Mesa 412 in a road case. They're hauling it up like a set of stairs, very heavy because the cab itself is like awkward to just lift upstairs, but like adding a road case is more weight and just again more of that. And they dropped it on the very last step and watched it bounce down the stairs and then like essentially take the door hinges off and just knock this door down, plugged in in the cab, totally fine. And
yeah,
like
just yeah, and the wood maybe got damaged, but
totally.
if you open up a speaker cab, there's nothing really to break unless pressure from the wood like impacts the speaker,
Hmm.
and like the wiring is nothing. There's wire goes to jack, wire goes to jack. That's it.
Mhm.
So to break one, you would have to shatter the wood, and the electronic components, even in that case, would probably still be fine.
How long of a match, or how long do you think it would take Brody, vocalist of God's Hate, to destroy a 4x12 cab or even just an amp in general?
If I told him where to punch it, he would probably do it in one shot. Aim for the cone. He'll probably bust through the mesh into the cone.
Right. Yeah. That's a pay-per-view event that I would pay to see for sure. Just like
That's like Street Fighter but with a cab.
yes, absolutely. Have there been any moments at the studio where either something has broken like unexpectedly or it's taken a beating and been totally fine and it's still sitting on the shelf?
I've dropped some shit, and it usually worked. I don't think I've ever dropped something and broken it for sure.
Hmm,
Not that I can think of. I have blown them playing them for sure.
totally.
Actually, Ian is 2 for 2 when we did the RJC record. My Yamaha T50 blew on the like last song.
Oh, okay.
and everything made it onto the record, which was cool. And then when we did the military gun record, we had a what was it? A Fender Twin running, and I think that blew up after song 8 or something like that, and we had to switch out.
Yeah, so how do you navigate that when an amp blows up and you're like, "Oh, we need this for 3 more songs," or whatever it is?
It luckily there were so many songs left that it was like okay to have kind of here's the A set of songs and the B set of songs.
Sure.
But when I mixed it, I just kind of we switched it out with a roll and jazz chorus, and I just like while we were tracking it, I tried to get it as close as I could to what we were doing already,
Mm.
and then in mixing, I was able to get it maybe perfect because I don't actually listen to that record and notice the guitar tone change.
Yeah, well, yeah, you fooled me because I've listened to that record like multiple times over. Ian
So the
sent it
new
to.
one, or the one that's already out, the 4-song one, could actually all be one,
Oh,
but
okay.
there's another 4-song one coming out in September,
Yeah.
but they're the same session.
Yeah. When I had Ian on the show, like he sent me the entire thing, so I was like listening to that upcoming for his episode. But he was like, you can't say the name or like any of that. But yeah, that's a has that been like an ongoing thing where every session has an opportunity for you to like essentially be DIY and figure it out, or like is it more often where it's like everything is set up now where it's like the headaches are minimized?
Um, I've gotten a pretty solid workflow
Hmm.
where I kind of have the gist of it. I'll hit a roadblock every now and then, nothing crazy. Like sometimes maybe I'll get a performer that maybe isn't as sick as I wish they were,
Sure.
and I kind of just have to switch gears. I had one thing recently where the drum performances left a little bit to be desired, and I just kind of switched gears with the recording, and I was like, all right, I think what we can do to bring out the best of the band and not have people focus on what this is maybe just make it as crazy as possible.
Hmm.
And it ended up being pretty cool in the end, and I don't think anybody's going to focus on the so-so performance.
Got you.
That's probably what I run into the most is just kind of dealing with uh, performance limits without turning it into some kind of like overly digital processed like borderline drum programmed thing,
Sure.
because I don't really like how that sounds, and I also don't really want to spend the creative time cleaning stuff up.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this is what the band's going to sound like if you go see them, so that's probably how the record should sound.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And if you had to share a piece of advice to, any small like people in bands, because I know people are going to be checking this out off of the bands, but also like maybe there's a couple people that are like, yeah, I want to record with Taylor one day. Like, what is something that you would recommend bands in prep for recording their first EP, recording their first full length? What do you feel like is not overlooked, but like not as um valued in the prep for a recording session?
I think one, it's usually drumming. Sometimes there are guitar players who, you know, maybe they play guitar in a 4-piece band where they play guitar alone. So they'll kind of play a different thing when they get to the certain part every time because they don't have to match another person.
Yeah.
I would say play the same thing. That play what your planned thing is the same way every time, so that you're not guessing later. Because when you track, even if you're a guitar player who plays alone, you're going to have to play it again to do your second guitar parts. Um, for drumming, I would say how you play and hear it in the room is how it will be recorded. There's no magic that is going to make this tom roll better. If this is how you hear it, that's how it's going to sound. Like obviously I can turn it up a little bit, but if you play hard and and the drums in the room sound like the mix that you would want, in quotes. I don't know if this video goes up too. I like then your mix will be good.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, and also I would be prepared and practiced to the point where you're playing these songs how you would like to hear them subconsciously
Totally.
without having to think about parts and fills and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the aspect of having it so dialed in, it is muscle memory, but
Yeah.
also very very it's not like you can just be in neutral and like just have it go. Like, be very intentional of like, okay, this fill is coming up, I definitely want to like make sure this cymbal hit is like really accented versus just doing it half-assed or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that like a lot of the people or clientele that you work with, come to you specifically off of the bands that you're doing, or is it like you like at least from the ones that I've seen, like there's definitely a nice range of different genres or subgenres that you're able to kind of hit between versus having it be like, this is the same producer that has done all the different, records. Like, I remember when I was first getting into heavy music, I definitely went through like listening, like when Rise Records was like all produced by Joey Sturgis, and it was like the breakdown kind of record label, but he did everything. So I've heard through you that you've have some similarities, but like there's clear differences between. So where does your mind go with that?
I'm trying to form. That was a loaded question.
No, that's fine. I guess like what's the Taylor sauce that you feel like most bands are coming to you for, even stuff that you've done or like upcoming things that you have in your calendar right now?
I would say, I mean, generally, I think it's a little bit of realness
Mm-hmm.
mixed with kind of a modern uh, size recording. Like I think I can get things to be natural but also big. Usually, like if you listen to a mid '90s record that sounds supernatural, it may be a little thin.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of have, I guess, modern sensibilities, but with a classic touch. I guess that's what I aim for, and what those are my complaints when I listen to records that I maybe didn't do, or
Mm.
like they weren't done by somebody whose records I like. Um, that something can either lean too modern or maybe a little too real.
Mm.
But I also just think I make bands sound like bands instead of separated digital things.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you do a nice job of having the marriage, like you said, between the realness and the, we are in a 2021, like there's so much modern heavy music to whet your palate with. So it's like to make certain things hit just a little bit harder, like maybe just adding like a sprinkle of digital on this record, it like will go a long way versus making it entirely sampled.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to a good sounding kick sample or something like that. Like if it evens things out, it doesn't sound like a band that grew up on Meshuggah and like Rise Records stuff
Totally.
like that. Then I then I'll do that. But if I can keep everything else real, I probably will.
Yeah. And like, looking back at like the very first time that you were recording, whether it was for your bands and then like to this point now where it's like, I don't know if this is necessarily the full-time thing that you're doing. Obviously, it might feel like full-time even if you have a job on the side or whatever. But do you think that you've learned more as far as recording off of the, repetitious like repetitious? No, repetitious aspect of like, doing this album and then learning from that and applying it to the next one and going over time? Because I think a lot of, there's clearly a lot of people that like recording and doing even demo stuff, but do you think that you've learned more by being in the trenches versus if you theoretically like went to school and had a formal education around this kind of stuff?
I definitely think that just kind of jumping in and getting my hands on stuff did more than classes or something.
Mm-hmm.
Although I did around 2009 take a recording class, and I was so uh, turned off by all the technical aspects that I like kind of fizzled out, and I think I ended up getting like a C in the class or something like that. And it wasn't until that I got to the point where I felt like I needed those things that I looked into those things. Like I couldn't name off like gear to you until maybe 5 or 6 years ago,
Hmm.
and I've actually been doing this full time since 2011.
Wow. So like
Yeah,
10 years.
yeah. So I had 3 years of just ignorantly making records, which in their own way, some of them work. Honestly, it wasn't until probably 2013 when I started getting records mastered by other people
Mm.
that I was like, okay, I was like mixing to master, and I needed to get better at just the mixing part.
Mm.
So I kind of forced myself to do it, and then I ended up getting more and more technical. Ended up getting more and more technical in the tracking and things like that. And uh, just this year, I got a console, which I think about the fact that if I had tried to set up this console 6 years ago, I would have been so overwhelmed and had no idea what the fuck I was doing.
Mm.
But like now, when I set it up only like 3 weeks ago, I did it without even thinking about it. I knew where everything was going, and knew the routing of the board without really trying.
Hmm.
There's just kind of there was a natural growth rather than store bought from school or something like that.
Yeah, and I feel like that's I feel like that's a great point just in the sake of whether it's like music or recording or even like running this podcast, like the comfortability and the growth needs to be um like you can't just be thrown into the deep end if you don't know how to swim. Like every band wants to go on tour for like 300 days of the year, but if they even haven't even done a week run where they've played to no one, like it's going to be so bad if it's like here's an entire like crazy 3 month tour, but like you don't know the ropes. And the same thing with this podcast. It would be it's very easy to say like here's these crazy guests like Taylor or like any of the other people that I've interviewed, but it wouldn't. I feel like these interviews would go south way more often if I didn't have that like practice of like talking to people and how to be a good host. And for you, even just on the whole fact of like, here's this big band that wants to record with you, and you're like, I've done a couple singles, and like you need to kind of earn your stripes and put in the years of work to be able to, like you said, be comfortable.
And if it's natural, then you're not like, it's not forced.
Right.
And the being in a band and touring was a good analogy because if your band might be really good live. Can you drive? Are you cool with sleeping on floors? Have you not been home? Do you have a dog that needs a dog sitter? Like there are a lot of stupid little details
Right.
that you need to know to be good at it.
Can you eat ramen for an entire month straight? Like not fancy ramen, like the like 99 cents from Walmart kind of ramen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's I think it's very easy, like I said before, to just like, even if it was handed to you, it would fall apart very quickly versus like, being dedicated and building up to that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just got a potential offer for a record for something that is bigger than anything I've ever done. And I think I would have been intimidated by it, maybe even as early as like 4 years ago.
Hmm.
But even now, I'm like, yeah, sure. But I think 4 years ago, I've been like, me? Like, are you
Totally.
sure?
Yeah.
Uh, uh, so we'll see if that happens. But
Yeah. Hopefully, knock on wood. I would love to be able to like tie a clip from this podcast if you land that thing and make one of the most monumental heavy records of whatever year that comes out.
I wouldn't call it that regardless, but it's something that is very out of my jurisdiction.
Oh,
Kind of.
okay. Interesting. Yeah. So, but I do agree, like, hitting you up was like a recommendation from my friend Matt, and it was
Yeah,
just
they're
like, yeah,
in
from Mind's Eye.
yeah,
Who he announced on his podcast that you're going to be recording with them. So, very excited to do that. But yeah, it's like, oh yeah, like Taylor's this big person, this big band, but like I'm comfortable to even just put the inquiry out. And now things are just coming for the podcast here where it's like, yeah, like if it was in the first week and it's like you're gonna interview Brian of Knocked Loose or like Cole from Gulch or whatever it is, like it would be a lot more daunting and probably would have maybe not gone as well and been as impactful. So yeah, I think it's important to you know get in the trenches and do the hard work to build something.
for sure.
What's you were mentioning reverb.com and buying things online. And I'm sure the amount of gear that you've accumulated over the last number of years is pretty substantial. What is like the bougiest thing that you have in your studio that maybe when you started you're like, oh, I don't need anything fancy or crazy like this, but now over the years you're like, actually I this helps me out immensely.
I mean, it could be this computer that we're talking from. I
Okay.
definitely used the same computer for probably 10 years, and I just got this like 18 core ridiculous one that I was like, yeah, someday I'll have a crazy computer. That one was probably the craziest thing until I got this console a month ago.
Got you. Mm-hmm.
It's definitely up there. It's not like a Neve crazy console or anything like that. It didn't cost me 6 figures, but it is the single most expensive thing probably. I mean, at this point, it's like the centerpiece. You actually just can't see it from it. Like ends literally right here.
Got you. Yeah. What? Okay, because I was gonna follow that up with what's the most expensive thing in the studio, but I'm kind of curious now. Like, what's the cheapest thing that you have in the studio that you use on a semi-regular basis for recording?
That's a good question. Probably one of the pedals I have or something. I mean, the tuner technically is the cheapest thing that gets used on the session.
Yeah, you can't really. I'm sure that there's probably some bougie tuners out there, but normally they're about the same.
If you got a Boss one, you're good to go.
Absolutely.
I do have the Yuri. I can't remember the number. Model 535 EQ, which is like cost me like $250, and I've used it on guitars for like 6 records at this point. Which is, it's like super cheap. They're actually built for adjusting your monitors in a room to fit the sound of the room.
Oh, okay.
But I use them like to EQ guitars or whatever, just because I can do like an exacerbated like crazy guitar tone, essentially. Like it's like a second pedal at the end of the chain.
Got you.
But it is essentially worthless as far as those things go.
Yeah, we've gone from almost 6 figures to like 200 and change.
Really,
everything plays its part, right?
Yeah.
What's something that like bands are obsessed with doing, like little samples or little details, as far as like I've heard everything from like like a keg, classic Slipknot, like bat to the keg, to like an actual like drink being opened. What's been one of the most unique things that you've like tried to figure out how you're going to record this like toy that someone brought into the studio or whatever it is?
There's nothing crazy that comes to mind. I will say that the weirdest thing that I've recorded the most times is probably a vibraslap,
What's that?
which it's a thing where you whack it and it goes, and it's like
Oh,
I've
okay.
probably recorded it like I mean I have one and people see it and they're like, whoa, we got to put this on there. But it's basically
Oh,
just like a
so where
percussion
would
play.
you where would
I
you
would put
put
it
that in?
right on a mosh part downbeat. It's the sickest thing. Let me see if I can pull it out,
Damn, yeah. Please, the people at
bro.
home need to hear that. Taylor's pulling out. Oh, he's got a road case. Looking under the couch. Oh, got a couple. Oh, there it is.
Felt like a little kid going through my toy box.
Yeah, I was narrating. I'm like, all right, we're looking under the couch. We got a road case.
This is a vibraslap. Basically, got a little vibrating thing in the box,
Uh-huh.
and then the ball is kind of like a weight distribution, and then
Sorry to the audio
Is that
listeners. That was hella loud.
sorry? Too close to the mic. Yeah,
So you've put that on a mosh part?
I've put it on probably at least 5.
5 mosh. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
is there
there's
one
a
specific on if someone needs to reference? Because that seems wild to me. I'm like, I feel like I'm in middle school band class seeing one of those for the first time, but knowing that has prompted mosh on a hardware record is crazy to me.
the last Downpresser record has it on there somewhere.
Okay.
One I can think of right away is Twitching Tongue's song "Sacrifice Me." If you
Okay.
scrub to like the mosh part towards the end, it's like right on the downbeat of it. It might be on the Dead Heat record somewhere. I think it is.
Okay.
But it usually, so what it does is it kind of mimics a rattlesnake sound once it's like tracked.
Mm-hmm.
Put reverb on it, so you give it a long tail, and it's just kind of this like ambient thing that's going, but it's kind of high pitched over the mosh part.
Gotcha. Well, I'm definitely gonna check it out for myself and see if I can, next time my band's recording to be like, look, yo, we gotta do some Taylor Young vibraslap on this song.
I would love to be credited for it. The first time I heard it like that was there's Only Living Witness song called "Voice of Disrepair." I think it hits on that mosh part. So.
Yeah. Well, I love the show and tell like of bringing that out and showcasing that.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Well, Taylor, a couple other questions before we start to wrap up the show. Obviously, you've been doing recording for bands and doing all these big things, and you got a couple cool things coming down the pipe. It sounds like. What's like the one big milestone or like big thing that you want to take your recording studio to? Is that like having like a new studio or like being able to work with X Band? What's your like North Star that you're trying to travel to?
It was 2 things for a really long time. It was console and control room, and a live room, a bigger one.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, being able to get one of them done was huge, and having the console. But I think having the bigger live room will expand things to a degree that nothing else can.
Gotcha.
Someday for sure, but if I want to stay in California, it's going to be tough, especially with property prices and things like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The worst house in my neighborhood is worth $800,000 at this point. So it's like, but it should be like, if we were in Ohio or something, it would be $100,000 house.
Mm-hmm.
Like none of them are particularly impressive. It's just location.
Yes. Yeah.
So it could be for never. It could be later. I don't know. Maybe if I get this big job and a bunch more big jobs, then I can do it. But for now, I'm stuck here for sure. Because
Yeah.
I don't actually own this house, but we've been here since basically we moved in here in 2006, and originally my dad lived here, and I was like, hey, I can take over this and function, and he was like, see ya. He literally left within like 2 months.
He's like, I've heard enough loud
Yeah,
drumming in this house. I'm good to check out at this point.
yeah, he was definitely he was psyched. He was so psyched that he did it as fast as he could. This was probably like 2012, I think.
Yeah. So it's like, and for those deuces, I'm out. Deuces, see you later.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, don't. That's so funny. Yeah, because I feel like most parents have their heavy music tolerance, and he was like, "That's my window to get out and fully hand it off to Taylor." So that's too funny.
And the people we rent from were just really cool about the studio, because all we did was raise the value on their house. So
Totally, yeah.
they're do whatever you want, and you can stay, because they said something, they never want to sell this house because this house is their retirement plan or something like that. So it was just like, I think because it was the first house they ever bought, and now they're like property owner, so they want to keep it forever. So it's never going to be like swept out from under me. But I've been paying into a house for 15 years, where I would half own it at this point.
Right. Yeah. It's, but like you were saying, like California is like one of those places that you're like, how am I paying this much for like this little, So well, dude, this has been a really great podcast and conversation. It's been great to learn a little bit more about, your background and what you do and just your process. And I hope that there's some things for either fans of your bands, but also your, recording quality can take away from. The last section of the podcast that I always ask all the guests is a favorite Mosh story that they would like to share. And that could be anything that's like first to your mind, whether it's something that happened to you or you did or happened at a show you were at, or you just saw. Whatever's the first thing to your head is how we start to end the show.
I'll tell this story just because we were talking about it. My brother and I and somebody else were just talking about it the other day.
Sure.
That's the first thing that came to mind. When this was like Sound and Fury 2012 or something like that. Whatever year the Black Breath played.
Okay.
We were playing Uno, and we do a thing where we kind of add an insane thing that the final loser has to do.
Oh, you're playing the card game Uno?
No, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We have our own rules, and basically it's, you add a stake that like you are fighting to not lose because you have to do the thing.
Yeah, it's not just fun and games. There's like actual consequences.
And I lost this game. And the game was, or the stake was, loser has to take this bag of 500 pennies and go run on stage and drop it all over the stage and stay there until they pick it all up. Now I lost, and I was probably the only person in the band who was friends with Black Breath, who was playing at that moment.
Sure.
So I was super
Did it
embarrassed.
need to be at a certain band or anywhere?
No, just whoever was playing at the time.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't realize who was playing at that moment.
Sure.
And so I realized who's playing, and I'm like, oh no, because like I knew them, but it wasn't on like a do whatever you want during our set kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're like a band, like they take themselves seriously, and I'm gonna go fucking do this goofy thing. So I put my hood up and covering my face as much as I can. It's the summertime, so I'm wearing a hoodie like an idiot already.
Right.
And I run on stage. I drop the pennies fucking everywhere, and I start picking them up, and I get like maybe 30 seconds in, and I'm just like, oh, I can't fucking finish this. This is insane. So I just front flip off the stage and do not get caught by anyone. I literally land on my back. And this is when it had a tall stage. And then I just like start moshing out of embarrassment. And I don't think I've ever told them that story, but I'm wondering if they remember it. I think there's a video of the set and people and like the camera pans away when it's
Oh,
happening
they
because they
thought it
can
was an embarrassing thing. It was like, maybe I won't film this.
yeah, and then the band is like looking at me like, what the fuck? Like, and it was the most cringy moment. And most people that played the game think I did a bad job with the steak, which I probably admittedly did. But those pennies were everywhere for a couple.
500 of anything and picking it up that small is like
brutal.
you'd probably be there half the set if you were actually doing it.
Yeah. And they weren't like a band that was going to have crazy stage dives or anything like that. So I was like alone when I went to go do it.
Right. You didn't have people like jumping over you. It was like, oh, I am front and center for this fiasco.
It was brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you lose on like a draw 4 or like what's like?
I don't remember how I lost. I apparently was not strategic enough.
Yeah. Looking back, you're like, I should have played this car first and all these things. Oh man.
Yeah.
It's crazy because up here in Canada we don't have pennies anymore. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh wow, everything 10 cents or 5 cents is the lowest?
Yeah. It got it rounds up or down. So
yeah. That's kind of smart.
It is smart because I was just down in California filming a fest and it was like there's no need for pennies. Like I have 4. Like just give me a nickel or, I'll give you these back. I don't need pennies.
At this point, I mean, we're not that far from cash being taken away entirely.
Right.
But that's also kind of problematic in a way, just like people who are day workers having that being taken away and things like that. Like it is an actual, I think, worry.
Yes.
That it's going to happen.
Definitely. Yeah. For people that prefer to be, there's a bunch of different industries that kind of still rely on that, right? Like, tattoo shops or like you were mentioning, like day workers. But yeah, we are, it might be a coin at a time. The first is the penny and then maybe it's 5 cents. But yeah, I don't think in our lifetime that, cash in its entirety will be gone. It might not just be the default. So
I kind of hope not, just because that would mean that every person is on the grid basically
yes.
at all times. And that I guess that really doesn't work because there are different lifestyles that would not allow that.
Yeah, totally. Well, Taylor, again, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I hope you had a blast. All your links and bands will all be in the description and the show notes. But if there's anything you want to end the people off with before we wrap it up, the floor is yours, my guy.
Shout out Withdrawal.
Yes. Mad shout out to Withdrawal. I love that you brought them up. I was literally just talking with Joel about setting up a podcast for him.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, we go way back.
How far back? Not to extend the podcast anymore, but like Adam Dyson was like probably one of the first people that I had on the podcast. I think he's like episode 5 or 6.
Yeah, I mean we've been friends probably since 2009 or something, like way back.
Yeah, definitely.
I think I bought their 7-inch. I think it was 2009, and they like wrote "We Heart Grimlock" on it or something like that. One of my favorite bands. And then we've just been like Facebook friends since then.
Got you. Yeah. So yeah, mad shout out to Withdrawal. Shout out to all the Winnipeg metallic hardcore people and bands. Taylor, thank you so much again for coming on the show. This has been really, really fun.
Yeah, I agree.